Who will survive? Gentlemen, as you know, the Ultimate Warrior. Fuck it. It's publicly stated that. Damn it, who put that up? Is that $200 an hour? Well, Hotline fans, I have got a hotline rumor for you.
Mean! Woo! My God! Gene!
Please, you've already given me my haircut. Brutus the Buck, take a look at this. Brutus, this is incredible. What a package. And ladies and gentlemen, yes, you can see it all on pay-per-view cable television. Don't wait till the 11th hour. Don't wait till later on in the week. Get on the phone right now and avoid the busy operators. Call to make plans to join us for the best ringside seat in your house for the big one this Wednesday night, Thanksgiving Eve. Get ready for the Survivor Series.
Follow the buzzer. Rest in peace. Woo! The best there is, the best there was, and the best ever will be. What you gonna do, brother? Hey, yo. Can you see me now?
Strategy my Oklahoma ass.
Light, shock, and then you die.
Hey everyone, good old JM here. Welcome to the JM Report, episode 40, coming to you from CSB Studios in Tampa, Florida, the birthplace of pro wrestling. And I hope everyone has enjoyed their new year so far, as it is now 2019. And of course, this marks the very first episode of the year. But unfortunately, not all good and happy news, at least not from the world of professional wrestling. As many of you have heard by now, we have lost yet another legend in Hall of Famer Mean Gene Okerlund. And I will have a little bit of a tribute later on in the show, along with others that we have lost so far since the new year has begun. And I got to say, 2019 is wasting no time by taking many well-known entertainers from the world, but I'll try not to be bitter, and I'm not sure if any of you can tell. I'm a little bit under the weather. This is actually me sounding much better than I was earlier in the week. Came down with a little something, and now I'm just fighting through this, and as they say, the show must go on, right? So with that in mind, let's just get right into it, as New Year's Eve, actually New Year's Day at the stroke of midnight Eastern time, literally started off with a bang, with a huge announcement coming from all the way in Tokyo, Japan, where this morning was Wrestle Kingdom 13. I will have the results later on as well. I just did not watch it. I did not stay up to 3 in the morning to catch the pay-per-view, as I'm pretty much going to spoil it for myself as I read the results, because I have no idea what happened. But I do have him here. I was able to snatch him up right before I came in the studio, and I will be, I guess, reacting, if any at all, surprise results were there, and any names mentioned. But one thing at a time. But back to this announcement. Made official by Cody Rhodes and the Young Bucks, along with Brandy, that All Elite Wrestling will come in 2019. Right now, they are working on TV deals, and where exactly will AEW will land. So pretty much Cody Rhodes and the Young Bucks have given us all a New Year's Eve or New Year's Day gift, if you will, as this could be potentially an alternative to whatever WWE's product has been giving out as of late. They are, WWE, they are in the position that they're in. They haven't really had any live televised events yet. That will come officially this Monday night on Raw and Smackdown on Tuesday. But I find it interesting, the timing of the reveal that was rumored for weeks of Cody Rhodes and the Young Bucks putting something together. And I'll get into some details that's been reported this week after the announcement was made. And the shake-up announcement made on Raw by Mr. McMahon, Triple H, Stephanie, and Shane, how things are going to change on their end. So looking back on it, at hindsight, maybe, for all we know, maybe they weren't going to say anything at all and just keep going as it is. But, oh, wait a minute, there's this rumor about Cody and the Bucks maybe doing something. Maybe we should react now to what's going on with our product and, make necessary changes or enough of them to keep interest with our audience on Raw and SmackDown specifically, and of course working everything out heading towards pay-per-views. But with that said, personally, I think about time. I mean, we've had previous attempts. Of course, there was TNA, now Impact, and then Global Force and Impact again. They're literally, they're like the, I'm trying not really to insult them because they've been around way longer than they really should have been. They've produced so many, at the time, unknown superstars, unknown names from other parts of the world, and eventually made their way up to WWE to perhaps win a little bit more of a salary, maybe a different schedule for themselves, and just continuing on with their craft. Of course, AJ Styles comes to mind, Samoa Joe. Not that they weren't well known even when they were in Impact, and of course throughout the independent scenes such as Ring of Honor. But it was just, I guess, a matter of time before eventually those guys, among others, would make the jump. Of course, there are a few other names in modern time that maybe we should see, or maybe we shouldn't see, depending, because of all the names that have jumped, and not all of them have been successful, at least not one after another. There's just been a tidal wave of sorts. We mentioned someone that jumped from, say, Japan, or jumped from Lucha Underground, and they aren't really being established as they should be because the audiences are different. That's usually one of the excuses, or they just don't know what to do with them. Yeah, we signed you. Now what? Beyond signing you, we really had no idea what to do with you. But of course, that doesn't always happen. Give it a few months, and then they'll probably hit that brick wall and be like, okay, now we have no creative for you. But anyway, before I get off too far off track here, as again, the announcement was made from Tokyo, Japan, the site of Wrestle Kingdom 13, and this coming Tuesday will be their first press conference discussing more details at the TIAA field in Jacksonville, Florida. Also interestingly enough, the same day of the press conference is also the first ever SmackDown Live event from the Veterans Memorial Arena, which is just a few minutes away from the TIAA field, also in Jacksonville. Interesting. And of course, they have already announced, we're just waiting on time and place, the follow-up to All In. Very successful, very entertaining and amazing wrestling show. Double or Nothing is their next planned pay-per-view event. Again, still waiting on when and where. Right now, they're looking for a TV deal. Hopefully, one that everyone has, meaning a network that every cable company carries, and that you don't have to pay for an extra tier because it's part of a package. And again, I have more details about this in a little while, but this is just my take on this. Maybe something like Universal, one of the Universal networks like NBC, or, well, they'll probably conflict with USA Networks. I understand that, but they have other different networks, and they can maybe try. And I mentioned that because of the potential link or aligning of the stars, if you will, because of who else is involved with this. And also mentioning Universal, they have a streaming network in Hulu, and they can upload their episodes there. Especially if you're a Hulu member, you can always catch up or always go back to a previous episode, because I'm expecting a lot of great shows from AEW. And that's those initials I got to get used to saying. However, some details or rumors have been shared or surfaced this week, but this is what we know so far. According to ringsidenews.com, now this is just a rumor, so take this for what it's worth. But AJ Styles could leave the WWE for AEW, as Styles is currently going through a bit of a change in WWE, as he now has a new nickname and is no longer the WWE champion. His contract is running up in April, and it is said by PW Insider that Styles has another option with All Elite Wrestling, and, quote, he was certainly fit with what they are doing, end quote. And by that, I always say we shall see. Considering how All In performed, it was just, well, and we all speculated. Problem is, it was televised. So someone like an AJ Styles or Daniel Bryan, who was neck and neck, or whether or not he was going to resign and maybe make a quick cameo at All In and then resign with WWE the next day to make everything official and legal. But the fact is, even if Bryan had done something like that, there would have been a no-compete clause and probably a no-appearance clause. They just come up with these creative tactics to avoid basically what Jeff Jarrett did many, many moons ago. He's on a WWF pay-per-view one night, and literally the next night he's on WCW Nitro. And and at that time he was not on the contract. So, someone explained that to me, but it's understandable and it makes sense. And we've all speculated of who would have showed up at All In, but it's doable. And I think with Double or Nothing will be a much bigger show in every sense of the term. I think if any mistakes, and there were a couple of botches, not too serious ones as far as production and appearance goes, but hopefully someone backstage was taking notes and will point them out like, hey, let's avoid this from All In as we're doing this now for Double or Nothing, and make this the best looking show possible. According to Raja.com, they reported that Tony Khan, the American football executive and businessman and also co-owner of the Jacksonville Jaguars, is the new president of AEW, is fronting $100 million for the launch of the company. There you go. In addition to that, one of the parties that the Khan is helping is a television deal with Time Warner, who is, if AEW and Khan did break with a deal, will also have the possibility of working with TBS and or TNT. And I know everyone has this networks available once you install cable companies into your homes, your cable boxes. This is automatically available, so that's a plus. The report goes on to say that legendary commentator Jim Ross will be heavily involved with the company in both the commentary position and backstage. Ross has denied these reports previously, but his deal with WWE is also set to run out in the fourth quarter of 2019. Wrestling super agent Barry Bloom's name is also in the mix from a recruitment role, as he represents a great deal of notable talent in the business. A name that has been brought up is Goldberg, and it is reported that AEW will go hard for talent that includes wrestling legends and the current crop of the top name and performers. Chris Jericho is also reported to have an in-depth role, and once the company's legal and able to, they will make a run at WWE employees who are not necessarily wrestling talent, but ones in roles who will help with the inner workings of the promotion. Roger.com finally states that while Cody and the Young Bucks are indeed executive vice presidents, the trio primarily focus will be in ring talent as well. So, yeah, that's a lot to take in. But you know what? They're trying to be successful. They're trying to bring back, they being Cody Rhodes and the Young Bucks, bring back pro wrestling to what it is and not necessarily this sports entertainment, because, you know, I've been on that rant before. And unfortunately, there is a difference. And the voices were heard finally, at least from WWE's point of view, hence why that shakeup announcement was made. And not to mention, if there's any truth to what the Fox deal is incorporating, that once SmackDown debuts on their end this year in October now, that they want SmackDown to be more sports-oriented, you know, less entertaining, more sports, as they want to include it in the sports block they have, Fox. And makes sense to me. You coughed up billions of dollars to get this company there to air one of their popular TV shows, and usually and it has been the better one of the two between Raw and SmackDown. SmackDown has been the more positive and popular one of the two in the past couple of years. So they really got to step up their game, especially on the Raw end. So one will probably have to reflect the other, and if SmackDown is going to go that more sports-oriented route, who says that Raw can't do the same? It's virtually the same show, just using different players. So I really don't see how that all difficult it can be. However, getting to that point is probably what is the difficult part of it. So we shall see. And in a final bit of info so far, until we get to Tuesday's press conference officially, announcing to the rest of the world about all Elite Wrestling, as PW Insider says, many of the talents that worked at the All In pay-per-view back in September of 2018 are in discussions for, quote, multi-year deals with the new promotion, which would be interesting because a lot of the superstars that took place or participated, I should say, at All In had working agreements or contracts with, say, Lucha Underground and MLW, and I'm sure there will be an official working relationship with MLW to avoid any and all legal issues or anyone that might be a breach of contracts. And I'm sure many of you know, MLW doesn't play that, as they've sent already a cease and desist to WWE and speaking with some of their talents and avoiding any future or potential issues where you might see yourselves in a court of law. So I think it's a great idea. The majority of talent that were at All In, both men and women, sometimes we reach a point as far as Lucha Underground is concerned of whether or not they'll return for a new season. And when they do tape their seasons in separate episodes, it's usually in a very small, very quick amount of time, and really in a matter of weeks, and they just spread them out for a few months for a season. So if they haven't done, let's say, like a lose-at-least town match or any major title changes, I can understand how that could reflect on said current superstar from Lucha Underground, who's expected to be their world champion, but appears that AEW, and I guess not recognize him. I think that's what they were trying to do at All In. We all knew certain superstars from Lucha Underground were there, but never acknowledged as their current champions, whichever division they were representing. I guess to avoid or conflicts in storylines, because Lucha Underground was, I believe, still running at the same time when All In was still out there. It could be wrong, but that's my take on that. And again, a lot of MLW stars with Lucha Underground work with each other, so it'll be interesting. Also interesting how much of an imaginary line there will be if one superstar, let's say Pentagon, who's with MLW, but here comes AEW, said, hey, we got a spot for you, and we would like it to work with this guy, this time, this date. Of course, common sense, if such an imaginary line does exist, you can't book anyone that already has a pre-scheduled event for the day that you want them. So, obviously, right? But I do see a lot of potential working relationships from not only MLW, possibly from also New Japan, as Cody and the Bucks have been working with them very closely for the past few years now, and having interpromotional matches. I would assume Jacksonville will be their main headquarters, or at least their hometown, their home base, so to speak. So have them being the New Japan talent, have them come over to the States more often. And of course, they have the shows out in Sacramento with New Japan. That is, they've had previous California tours, and I haven't followed them much on TV lately. But I know New Japan is still trying to expand on their American tours, and really make a big deal about their United States Championship. So, yeah, a lot of doors have opened up here. They were already there. It's just a matter of how to open them and see who can walk through them back and forth safely. Because if the issue is going to be, one of them anyway, about talent being tied down one side and cannot perform on another, deals can be arranged. It's been done before. Rarely, but it's been done before. It's just a matter of everyone being happy about it, and that within itself is not too easy. So once again, I am really, really excited to see how and when All Elite Wrestling gets off the ground. I'm pretty sure they'll have a live stream of the press conference on social media, and I'll be sure to take down some notes, and I'll bring that to you next time on the JM Report. But for now, let's get into other news, including Raw and Smackdown that were pre-taped for New Year's Eve and New Year's Day, last Friday and Saturday, respectively. And right off the gate, I'm going to say, not bad shows. I mean, they're pretty good for what they were. And breaking down the detail, originally John Cena was advertised for both shows, but he only showed up for SmackDown. No reasons given, as I guess Mr. Santa Claus, or whatever the hell his name was a bit off on that. And if you go back, the graphic did show Cena and both Raw and SmackDown logos next to him. So what happened with Raw, who knows? But the Raw show opened up with a steel cage match between Drew McIntyre and Dolph Ziggler. McIntyre will get the win, and he is now the new self-proclaimed king of the Raw jungle, as he has entered himself into the Royal Rumble and seemingly ending the feud with Ziggler after a post-match attack with a Claymore kick, leaving Ziggler laid out. Seth Rollins will come down and demand his rematch with Dean Ambrose for the Intercontinental Championship, but this brings out Triple H, reminding Rollins that the automatic rematch title clause is out the window. Like Vince McMahon to AJ Styles the week before on SmackDown, Triple H wants to see the monster or the beast or this demon or whatever he said in Rollins to come back out again, the same guy that stood by his side and then later kick his ass at WrestleMania. Of course, Rollins will rebuttal with the truth, saying that he was the guy that carried the show when Lesnar was at home doing nothing, and Rollins have had matches of the night types every week, and this will set up a match from Triple H, as Rollins will take on Bobby Lashley later on in the night. But before things could escalate, Shane McMahon will come down and break things up a little bit and mention that there will be a fresh start battle royal where the winner will take on Dean Ambrose for the Intercontinental title later on that night. And sure enough, we saw Finn Balor, Lucha Underground. I keep doing that. Try that again. We saw Finn Balor and Lucha House Party Zack Ryder, Kurt Hawkins, Titus O'Neil, the B Team, The Ascension, Tyler Breeze, No Way Jose, Baron Corbin, Mojo Rawley, and the eventual winner of the Battle Royal, Apollo Crews, as all these superstars made their way to the ring. And even if he didn't win, Apollo Crews really looked strong here and definitely was the MVP of the match, as he eliminated about 8 or 9 guys in the Battle Royal, really making them look real strong. And I say it's about time. This guy had a lot of potential when he was called up from NXT to the main roster. And I believe he had a couple of IC title opportunities with The Miz at the time when he was still on Raw and he was still the IC champ. And for reasons didn't work out, but here we are again, giving Cruz an opportunity here. So he will take on Dean Ambrose for the IC title a bit later on. Natalya gets a promo interrupted backstage by Nia Jax and Tamina as they beat her up and left her laying. And this will set up a tag team match as Natalya teamed up with Ronda Rousey to take on the heels of Nia Jax and Tamina. Baron Corbin apparently was still in the ring after the Battle Royal was long over, and gets on the microphone and shouts out that he deserves a fresh start. Out comes Elias, who thankfully forgot that Kid Rock was a Hall of Fame member of the WWE after name-dropping him. But Elias begins to sing a song only for Baron Corbin to start a fight. And the fight ended with Elias chasing out Baron Corbin, so really not much here. We then get a 6-woman tag team match between Ember Moon, Bayley, and Sasha Banks taking on the Riot Squad in a bit of a revenge match from the previous week's attack, unprovoked, by the way. But, gosh darn it, they're the Riot Squad, and they got a riot. By the way, shout-outs and kudos and congratulations to Sarah Logan as she tied a knot with War Raiders Rowe. They are now husband and wife. And curious to see exactly where the War Raiders, I was about to call them the Raw Raiders, but yeah, curious to see where the War Raiders would land as far as coming to WWE, in which brand, Raw, SmackDown. Of course, it will make sense for them to land on Raw. And if I really want to throw in a couple more names to where I think they should go, Nikki Cross should definitely go to SmackDown. More because giving an opportunity to reunite with Sanity and kind of do a bit of a takeover there as far as the Women's Championship and the Tag Team titles. But we shall see. But back to the 6-woman tag team match. The Faces will win after Sarah Logan tapped out to Sasha Banks. Banks statement. And all the Faces celebrate. And we move on to Seth Rollins and Bobby Lashley. This was a very good match. I would say one of Lashley's best matches since coming back to WWE almost a year ago now, as Rollins had to fend off Leo Rush as well, and at one point chasing him around the ring, and finally caught Leo Rush with a super kick on the outside of the ring. But this made Rollins mad and brings in the chair into the ring and gets disqualified after hitting Lashley in the back, and for good measure gave Leo Rush a nice little curb stomp at the end. So there's your monster, there's your beast, or your inner Rollins is now slowly emerging, and we'll see how this all plays out on a live Raw episode this coming Monday. Jinder Mahal and the Singh brothers teamed up for a 3-on-2 handicap match, taking on Rhino and Heath Slater. Seemingly and quietly into the night, Rhino was reinstated, and Heath Slater's no longer a referee. Poor Corbin. At least for now, he's still getting the brunt of all this nonsense, all this backlash as to why Raw sucked the past few months, the past few years. But funny thing is, Corbin wasn't around for all of it, but I see what you're doing there, Vince. Unfortunately, the heels would win this match as they had a lot of double and triple team maneuvers on the Faces, and they will win, leaving Rhino and Heath Slater on the losing end. And an amazing match, better than expected, for the Intercontinental Championship, Dean Ambrose and Apollo Crews. But Dean will retain after Apollo Crews will miss a frog splash from the top rope, and Ambrose will capitalize with Dirty Deeds, gets a pin, and win. We next see Alexa Bliss backstage, and she has seemed to have turned in her role as women's division runner-up. Instead, for a new talk show segment that will begin debuting this coming week on our first ever Raw live episode of 2019 called A Moment of Bliss. And it's scheduled to be Ronda Rousey as her special guest. So we shall see where this goes. Obviously, still concerns of Alexa Bliss's injuries, even though she was medically cleared, but the concussion is still an issue. As it's really unfortunate. I mean, they obviously recognize Alexa Bliss's talent as a great talker, as a great person that can cut a tremendous promo, really get under the skin of the fans if she wanted to, and work them. So if this is the best they can come up with, at least Alexa Bliss is getting TV time as she deserves, even if we have yet to hear an official announcement of whether or not she'll be returning to the ring or no. We shall see. And the main event spot saw Ronda Rousey and Natalya taking on Nia Jax and Tamina. Not much of an ending here, though. Ronda Rousey would get Tamina to tap out after she missed her Superfly Splash attempt into the armbar, and Natalya and Ronda Rousey win. So again, it wasn't a completely horrible show. I thought a lot of bits were awesome. The Battle Royal, the Apollo Crews Dean Ambrose match, the Seth Rollins Lashley match, and the women's tag team main event was pretty good as well. But again, it's pre-taped. You're not going to give or do all your great stuff on pre-taped shows, especially nowadays where everything and anything can be spoiled via social media with smart devices. So kind of some slack here a little bit, although their rating numbers were up a little bit from the previous week that ultimately was the all-time low ever in Raw's history. But it did rebound. Unfortunately, it was still under the 2 million mark. Over on SmackDown, the New Day opened up, wishing everyone a Happy New Year. Big E, of course, was the New Year baby. and they mentioned that all three members will be entering the Royal Rumble. And when it came down to statistics and the numbers, Big E did a mockery of Scott Steiner's old Impact math promo, which was completely hilarious. Anyone haven't caught it, you need to hear this. And they introduced the first match of Jeff Hardy taking on Samoa Joe, where the winner will be inserted into the main event's Fatal 5-Way later on that night. And the winner of that match will take on Daniel Bryan for the WWE Championship at the Royal Rumble. That's a mouthful. Samoa Joe slaps onto the Coquina Clutch on the outside of the ring, but breaks in order to avoid the referee's 10 count, but slaps it right back on Jeff Hardy as soon as he re-entered the ring, causing Hardy to pass out, choked out, if you will, and the referee calls for the bell, and Samoa Joe filled in the final fifth spot for the Fatal 5-Way. We then see Vince and Shane McMahon sitting backstage in their office and see AJ Styles walk in from off-screen, saying that he will not apologize for slapping Vince the previous week and that the monster may come out during the Fatal 5-Way match later on. Of course, Shane is back to his are you heel or face shtick, because we saw him the day before on Raw and stepping in between Triple H and Seth Rollins. Triple H is not really a heel now. We haven't seen any heel authority tactics yet, though we're expecting it. But because the shake-up announcement was made, all four members of the McMahon clan are faces at this point. But here we saw Shane basically standing up for Vince, and after Styles refused to apologize for slapping him, Shane stands up, kind of, I guess, rekindling their feud, Styles and Shane, from their WrestleMania match a few years ago in Orlando. And not that it's going there, because Shane got something else going on. Styles is about to have something else going on. So it would not make sense to go there unless it's going to be a one-off match on SmackDown at some point, then maybe. Otherwise, again, is Shane a heel, face? I mean, what's he trying to pull off here? But we shall see. Rusev and Lana tried to celebrate their United States Championship win over Shinsuke Nakamura from last week, only for Nakamura to crash the party, first taking down Rusev, and Lana would jump on Nakamura's back. Rusev will recover and superkick Nakamura, not realizing that Lana was on his back, and she takes a back bump, seemingly knocking her out, and Shinsuke rolls off to the side as Rusev is in distraught. He's distracted. He can't believe what he just did. turns around, and Nakamura hits him with a Kinshasa and leaves out Rusev and Lana laid out as the United States champion. Never got to really celebrate. What were they chanting? USA Rusev Day or something like that. There you go. There's a new T-shirt. And I personally got my confirmation on the whole angle between Sonya Deville and Mandy Rose. I guess they're not splitting up after all. We're just going to completely ignore that. And it was they were together, and we were going to see originally Mandy Rose take on Naomi after last week's Rose. Mandy Rose was floating around with Jey Uso. Instead, Sonya Deville steps in after Rose revealed that she was wearing a Uso T-shirt, and eventually showed a picture on the Titantron that she sent to Jey Uso, where Mandy Rose was just wearing nothing but a towel. Of course, Naomi gets upset and distracted by this, as Deville takes advantage of the distraction and rolls her up for the win. Curious to see where this goes, and now that Asuka's no longer teaming up with Naomi, if it comes down to it, who will Naomi team up with? And again, all these, you notice they're keeping a lot of these teams together rather than breaking them up. And the announcement last week during the Christmas edition of Raw that McMahon Claus, whatever, predicted the upcoming tag team championships for the women's division. Still no further details than that, but to see if it comes down to obviously a tournament of sorts, not only to compete for the titles, but who will Naomi team up to further the feud with Rose and Deville. So let's stay tuned for that one. John Cena finally shows up with his funky bunch hairdo, teaming up with Becky Lynch as they took on Andre Cien Almas and Zelina Vega in a mixed match challenge. And at the end, Vega was alone in the ring with Cena, only for Lynch to toss him out of the ring. Literally, Becky Lynch tossed out John Cena out of the ring and places Vega into the Disarmer for the win. After Cena goes out to shake Becky Lynch's hand, she basically shuts that down and does the "you can't see me" gesture and leaves. So many looked at this as passing a baton of sorts from Cena to Becky Lynch. And I could see that. It's not often we see a baton pass from a male performer to a female performer, which is not easy to do. But somehow they pulled it off here. And yeah, Becky Lynch is continuing on with her man role. And one of the greatest performers right now on the SmackDown women's roster. So why not get a little bit of the Raw brother from John Cena here, who's been pretty much at the top for 15 years at most. So kudos to Becky Lynch. We will see a segment backstage with The Miz and Shane McMahon, where The Miz was suggesting and even showing possible ideas for ring attire for their eventual teaming up and make the debut in the ring real soon. And one funny bit, one of the suggestions was would appear to be a Photoshop head of Shane McMahon on Goldberg's body. And he's in the tights, he's in knee pads, elbow pads, everything. Of course, decked out in Miz attire, but with the Miz logos and everything, the sunglasses, the headband, basically cloning Damien Sandow here, only it's just Shane. So how messed up would that be if Shane McMahon goes the route that Damien Sandow did, or Damien Mizdow did, and sort of be a stunt double? I doubt it, but still, here they're blatantly doing this when before Mizdow just showed up and started teaming with The Miz, and out of nowhere they're dressing alike, and he's my stunt double, not realizing that he would eventually steal the show and eventually cost him his job because they weren't the ones that created it. Oh, gosh darn you, WWE creative. So anyway, eventually we'll see The Miz and Shane McMahon officially team up. Don't be surprised if it does not happen on the live episode of SmackDown this week. And in the main event, we saw Mustafa Ali, Randy Orton, Rey Mysterio, AJ Styles, and the final member, Samoa Joe in a fatal 5-way match. An insane match. But at the end, we see AJ Styles hit his 450 splash on Orton to get the win. And AJ Styles will now face Daniel Bryan at the Royal Rumble for the WWE Championship. So, again, I got to say, both shows were much improvement than the previous week's Christmas editions. And not much of a shakeup yet because, again, we're just trying to get through the holidays. And it's a lot of things they really got to live up for. Yeah, see new faces, new match types, new this and that, micromanagement, or whatever the hell bullcrap that Triple H said that night. We have to see it, and if it's not during this week, who knows when it's going to be. But if it doesn't happen this week at all on either show, then they're just trolling us. And yeah, more of a reason for when I had my rant about it. It should have been themselves. It should have been Paul Levesque and not Triple H make that announcement. It should have been Vince McMahon and not Mr. McMahon to make that announcement. But it is what it is. Let's get into other types of news here. Back on the 28th of December, the day after what would have been her 49th birthday, Chyna's mother, Jan, took to Facebook and had a quite of a personal statement to WWE. She goes to say, as many of you know, yesterday would have been Joni's birthday, Chyna. I truly appreciate all the messages and remembrance of her that were posted by so many of you. As you can imagine, it's always a very sad day for me, but it helps a lot to know how many people remember her and loved her. It's one of those worst things in the world to lose a child. We have to get her into the WWE Hall of Fame. She richly deserves it to be there. And WWE, listen up and do what's right for Chyna. You owe her that for what she did for you and women's wrestling. She earned her place there, and it's long overdue. I agree. I don't know what they're waiting for, especially after that bullcrap speech that, again, Triple H made on the Stone Cold podcast on the network many years ago about the cop-out excuses of, well, we know if we start promoting Chyna and some 12-year-old kid's going to look her up on Google her and by that. Type in Chyna now, and times have changed, obviously, so the results will be completely different. But if you Google Chyna, scroll down and then skip pages, and you tell me how far do you get in before you get to Chyna's short-lived career in adult film? Because that was Triple H's argument and concern. And she's passed on, Chyna has, unfortunately, at a very young age. It's unfortunate in the circumstance that it happened, but you know, no one was there to help her otherwise, and she just relapsed into depression. And whether it was intentional or accidental, we'll never know, but it happened, and she's no longer with us. And it's really, really sad. And I get a little bit upset because I just met her, I'll say, just a few months before she passed in New York. And I was finally so excited. Yes, a member of the original DX. I got to meet Chyna. I met Shawn Michaels before, but he wasn't that Shawn Michaels anymore. But, you know, Chyna. Unfortunately, I can't meet Roush and Rick Rude. And I had a little bit of a hiccup meeting Triple H, but that'll be another time for a different story. But really, at this point, there's no excuse. And you're running out of names. Matter of fact, running out of excuses to put out there as to why certain people are not in the Hall of Fame. I spoke to Georgia Smith, daughter of Davey Boy Smith, a couple of months ago. And she may not know exactly how the process works as far as who's decided, what names are chosen. Ultimately, it's up to Vince McMahon. But even she agreed that it's just, you know, ridiculous as to why so much time passes by before they realize that certain names are not being suggested or even mentioned who have yet to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. So Davey Boy Smith, yet to be inducted. Dynamite Kid, who recently passed away, yet to be inducted. And to go by Bruce Pritchard's argument, like, well, if you had a bit of a falling out or maybe a lawsuit or two against WWE, or just have complete friction or conflict between the company, what sense would it make to induct that person or persons into the Hall of Fame? I'm not saying the very next year after the conflict beginning. I'm not saying 2 or 3 years down the line, but eventually you have to go back. One has to be the bigger person and say, okay, you deserve this. Go out there, give the 45 1-hour speech and have your moment. For all we know, which end up being the very last one they have in front of a WWE audience, much less the world. And they're being denied that because, well, we can't induct Demolition because they sued us so many times, most recently in that concussion suit. What sense would it make to reward them with a Hall of Fame induction? Again, be the bigger man. You won that battle. That lasted more than a year. And for all we know, Action Smash, who've been very vocal about being in the Hall of Fame, the fans have been, I have been vocal about them being in the Hall of Fame. Are you really holding on to that bitterness? Like, oh, they sued me, but we won, but still they sued us. Grow up. In WWE, between Vince, Triple H, Shane, Stephanie, whomever, one of them, all of them will be the first ones to say, what's best for business. It's in your best interest of your business to do what's the right thing here. In the case of the mother of Chyna, Miss Jan, to do what's owed to her. Interesting to see who will be the one inducting her. But there are many others that deserve that spot. I guess it's just a matter of time. Of course, there are exceptions. Probably someone's thinking about, well, what about Owen Hart? Well, again, me and Georgia Smith, by the way, that interview is available on my YouTube channel at IAmGoodOlJM, and you can hear for yourself her thoughts on that. But it's very understandable. Martha Hart, the widow of Owen, is very understandingly, let me try that again. It's easy to understand her point of view as to why she does not want her to see her husband in the Hall of Fame. I know Mark Henry, when he was inducted, he looked dead in the camera, tears running down his eyes, begging Martha to let it happen. It may or may not. I personally would love to see, I'm sure as many of you do, Owen Hart accept this, be inducted. Again, by whom? Be interesting to see who it would be. And take his rightful place in the Hall of Fame, just like Chyna, just like Demolition, just like many other people that have come and gone with the WWE, Davey Boy Smith, the Dynamite Kid, all these names, all these men and women that put their heart and soul, blood, sweat, and tears, their bodies on the line, sacrificing what many are sacrificing today, and back then was worse, the right thing. And it pisses me off that, well, so-and-so passed away, so now we can induct them because maybe they'll avoid during their speech to say something ill about the company or something about McMahon. I can see and understand that point of view that may not be the platform. And it's easy for me to sit here and say, well, no, I'm not going to do that. I'll just tell you whatever gripes I have or axes to grind. I'll tell you face-to-face or backstage somewhere in person, away from the cameras, away from prying eyes or those little reporters hiding in the bushes across the street. The big, when the Warrior was inducted, and even he mentioned, oh, it's finally here. What's he going to say? What did he say? And if anything sounded remotely negative, he took it in stride and turned it into a joke. Cooler heads eventually prevail. But the same cannot be said about someone who's already passed away and are no longer here to defend themselves. Stephanie herself, it was a while back ago, talked to TMZ Sports, and doesn't know what year, doesn't know when exactly, but because of her contributions, that Chyna will eventually go into the Hall of Fame. Now, that's good to know. I mean, even though Triple H said otherwise, the ex-boyfriend said otherwise, the new girlfriend that he hooked up with after that relationship with Chyna, Triple H said, yeah, she'll go in eventually. So, not to stir little bullshit stories of that where back in the day you stole my boyfriend, the kind of thing. Well, you can't even go there again because Chyna's not here to defend herself. And if that's the logic or the excuse originally not to have her in at all or ever come back again, then who really is the bitter one? That they moved on to make their money and TV appearances. In the meanwhile, Chyna, all heartbroken that she was at that time period, never really recovered, at least from my point of view. Trying to move on with her life, made a few movies, traveled around the world, went to be an English teacher in Japan. So she tried. Things just didn't work out. I believe she got into another relationship before she eventually left Japan. And whatever personal reasons there were, I don't think she shared them, unless they're still up on her YouTube channel. But, she tried. And even then, like, well, my time is up here, so I got to go back to the States, find something else. Okay. I'll take it down a notch. Moving on. Plus, me talking so much doesn't help with my sinuses, unfortunately, but I'm hanging in there. In other news, Booker T will be returning to the ring on January 12th, where he will be competing against Rex Andrews for his Reality of Wrestling promotion, which will mark the first time in many years since 2015 Booker T returns to the ring. And back then, the last time he was in the ring, he teamed up with his brother Stevie Ray. So quite a few years, not that far off, just over 4 years. And that could be a lifetime if you're a wrestler in the position that Booker T is in, a Hall of Famer and long time retired. But you never really retire. I'm sure many of you know. Just ask Terry Funk. How many times did he retire officially, only to come back? It's like, you just can't let it go. It's, hate to use the word addiction, but for many it is. And I say that in a good way because you just want to keep doing something you've always loved and something that you're very good at. So I'm not sure if they will stream this match on their social media pages. Reality of Wrestling, that is. So I'll be curious to see how exactly Booker T performs after nearly 4 years out of the ring. Jason David Frank of Mighty Morphin Power Ranger fame, yes, that one, will be having his debut match in a professional wrestling ring sometime in 2019 for the Laredo Wrestling Alliance in Laredo, Texas. Frank got into a confrontation with one of the performers, Bryson Scott, at the last show of 2018, as Scott fell onto Frank's lap, sitting ringside, which, by the way, had no guardrails, and Frank shoves him off. Scott will get into Frank's face, and Scott will punch out two of Frank's personal security guards, and all of a sudden, Frank called out to the power of the Dragon Zord, and I'm just kidding, that didn't really happen. But Frank threw a nice-looking right hook, knocking down Scott, and both men were broken up apart at the LWA's Let's Say Goodbye event. Shortly after, Frank gets on the microphone and asks the crowd about stepping into the ring, and we will get it. Eventually, no date has been determined, but eventually, Jason David Frank will make his pro wrestling debut for Laredo, Texas, sometime in 2019. And later on, I believe it was the very next morning, he spoke with Laredo Morning Times, and this is what Jason had to say. I've always been interested in stepping into a wrestling ring. I don't do this stuff. I do MMA. Just to learn this stuff is cool. I went to WWE, but just to see this passion of these fighters, everyone is hungry and everyone wants to be the best that they can be. I like that. I love going to South Texas, Comic-Con, and I've always wanted to do a Power Morphin Con down here. We are doing one in Texas, and I have been wanting to do one in Loretto. So when LWA called me, they soon asked me for my price was, and I had told them I would love to come down to do it for free. I feel like for me and my fan base, you are never too big to attend events like this or to come to towns that most people don't go to. I'm happy to be here and looking forward to working with LWA. So quite interesting to see here, especially since coming off the heels of David Arquette, who's been really active as of late in the pro wrestling independent scene. And who's to say that the athletic caliber of one David Jason Frank, or is it Jason David Frank? Jason David Frank, I apologize. And yeah, he's been amazing. He's been one of the super coolest guys I've ever seen. I never got to meet the man yet, but I would love to. Maybe at another Comic-Con, as he mentions here, or Morphicon, to head out to maybe out here in the Tampa area. But yeah, he has the skills. He mentioned he's never done wrestling before, and it's a different beast compared to MMA training. I'll tell you that much. It is not easy. It takes a lot of passion, a lot of dedication, and a lot of physical demand. So really curious to see how the Green Ranger here performs, not only against Scott, but anyone. And if he gets a knack for it, you know, we may never get to see that charitable match between Jason David Frank and CM Punk. They've talked about that for years. Never got off the ground. It was probably an opportunity when all the buzz in the world was Punk signing with UFC, and in between both of his matches, just, again, never came around to it. So it wasn't mentioned here, but it's ironic how Jason David is now basically stepping into the world of CM Punk that he left many, many years ago now. And yeah, this is very exciting. I can't wait to see how it's pulled off and how well Jason performs in a wrestling ring. UFC President Dana White provided an update on the future of Brock Lesnar in the Ultimate Fighting Championship. Lesnar still needs to get through the required USADA testing re-entry period, which is set to end in early 2019. And because of the John Jones win at UFC 232, that also opens up the door for Jones to fight Cormier for the third time instead of Brock. A lot will depend on whether Cormier decides to stick to his retirement scheduled for this coming March. Because of this, and if he does, then it's likely a toss-up between Jones and Lesnar regarding who gets to fight. Cormier, that is. Dana also stated that if Cormier would decide to fight 3 more times, which he believes is possible, then John Jones, Brock Lesnar, and Stipe Miocic all make sense for the champ. In regards to Brock Lesnar being out of the title picture, Dana White says he is not out of the picture. On regards of if UFC could sign him, Dana White says absolutely. I think he's already on the contract with me. That doesn't sound too convincing, but okay. Based on his future, Dana White would say, well, we were talking about it, and then he ended up signing with a new deal over at WWE. What I think happens is that he's in a very unique position because he can play this thing between UFC and WWE. They get right down to the wire, and I think Vince throws so much money at him that he goes, all right, I'll do it again. Because this is here no matter what, that being UFC. When he is ready, he can come in here and fight, and he's going to make a shitload of money over here as well. So it makes sense. I assume that's what's going on. Dana White on Brock Lesnar's future with UFC. And at this point, to be honest, going into the Royal Rumble, where Lesnar's expected once again to defend the Universal title, this time against Braun Strowman one-on-one. He's also scheduled to appear this Monday night on Raw, more likely to address all this animosity from the fans. I'm sure he'll take a shot at Seth Rollins, or at least Paul Heyman will. And at this point, since its debut, the Universal title, not that it was entirely looked at as a joke other than being referenced as the Fruit Roll-Up Championship or the Tootsie Roll or the Twizzler title, whatever you want to call it. But really, in hindsight, there was an opportunity there when Roman Reigns won it finally from Lesnar that we would have had a fighting champion on Raw. And unfortunately, Roman Reigns made his announcement, and then we got to Parts Unknown, and they once again put the strap back on Lesnar. To what sense did that make? Who knows? Only in the insane mind of Vince McMahon and or creative. And think about it. That was November. Here we are in the new year, January. We had a couple of pay-per-views ever since. And yeah, he was a Survivor Series. Okay, fine. But that whole show had to be rewritten, as McMahon really didn't want it to be another Raw versus SmackDown show, but it was. And the Universal title could have been defended at TLC. Not by Lesnar, but maybe a Strowman. Yeah, sure, Strowman eventually went down with that elbow injury and needed surgery. But they're going to have a transitional champion, even though it would have been short-lived. But you know what? The title would be on television. So I'm not going to get into another rant about this, but I really do not put anything past these people, from creative to Vince to whatever promises they intend to not keep moving forward. And, Lesnar, let him be Lesnar. Do you, boo-boo. And, just don't do it with the title. It needs time to establish. Hell, it needs time to be on television. Even when Kevin Owens was on, didn't defend him much. But you know what? For the love of Pete, he was on TV. Same thing with Goldberg. But at least when Goldberg, that short run he had with the title, he was on about every other week. But again, at least it was on TV. But I digress. And you know what? Let's move on, as I got a couple of more stories to share here before I wrap up my first episode of 2019. Davey Boy Smith Jr., or Harry Smith, has signed a multi-year deal with MLW, and they have released a statement on that regard. The rise of the Hart Foundation in Major League Wrestling has been one of the most exciting stories to watch over the past half year. Dominating competition in singles, tags, and trios action, their march to the top has been felt in multiple divisions. Now, the new Hart Foundation's presence in MLW is guaranteed to continue for years to come, as Davey Boy Smith Jr. has officially signed a multi-year deal with MLW. Davey is very special, said by MLW CEO Court Bauer. He's been part of the MLW dating back to when he was just 18. And I know I speak for the fans and the league when I say we're very excited to see what the big guy does in 2019 and beyond. Smith joins Teddy Hart and Brian Pillman Jr., who signed with the league in 2018. In addition to MLW, Smith will continue to compete with New Japan Pro Wrestling, where the Bulldogs have won their coveted IWGP Tag Team Championships 3 times. Finally, we end on a sad note. As I mentioned earlier, 2019 wasted no time in taking not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 names from the entertainment world on January 2nd, as reported by IAmNY.com. Musician Peggy Young died on Tuesday, January 1st. as a statement was posted on her official Facebook page reading, Young was the ex-wife of Neil Young, died at the age of 66 after battling cancer. And then on January 2nd, star of Curb Your Enthusiasm, Bob Einstein, died on Wednesday, according to Deadline. He was 76. The actor who created 1987's Super Dave Osborne had been battling cancer. And the musician behind hit songs such as Love Will Keep Us Together and Do That To Me One More Time, Darryl Dragon of Captain and Tennille also passed away at the age of 76 and died of kidney failure. And perhaps one of the biggest hits taken by the pro wrestling world this week, and it was real hard when we heard the passing of Mean Gene Okerlund, who also passed away at the age of 76. At the time, there was no official word or report on cause of death. However, Mean Gene's son Todd perhaps shed some light as to what happened in an interview with TMZ. And the report would mention that Mean Gene Okerlund was severely injured during a nasty fall back in December, triggering a rapid decline in his health that ultimately led to his death. Okerlund suffered multiple broken ribs during the fall at his Florida home and was treated at the hospital in Sarasota. Just 4 days before his death, Mean Gene was admitted to a nursing home, but he began to have trouble breathing and was rushed to the hospital on Wednesday, where he ultimately passed away as his wife Janine was by his side. I got to meet Mean Gene on a number of occasions, and quite humble, very nice, extremely happy man. Was always open to meeting his fans, including someone like myself from growing up in the 80s, and of course meeting new fans that learned to know who he was. And I believe it was Bay News 9 out here in Tampa did a quick newsreel on the passing of Gene Okerlund, and they were over at Hogan's Beach House, the retail store, and surprisingly, a lot of the young fans that had to be mid to late teens were talking about how awesome he sounded, Mean Gene was, during interviews and promos. They loved the sound of his voice. He was really old school and really nostalgic to learn of Mean Gene, and I was pretty surprised and at the same time proud that, to hear young fans of today can go back and appreciate what came before what you see today, and more or less have an idea who might have been an innovator or someone who influenced or who started it all. Of course, Mean Gene's career did not begin in the WWE. He had many stints in a lot of territories, one of them being the AWA before eventually joining the World Wrestling Federation. And of course, I was very upset when this happened, but eventually would join World Championship Wrestling after Hulk Hogan signed in the mid-90s, and would see that company to the end. Mean Gene did, and made an appearance. He'll make several, but in one of his first appearances after the buyout of WCW, of course, alongside the late great Bobby the Brain Heenan, doing color commentating for the Gimmick Battle Royal at WrestleMania 17, that is. And it looked and it sounded like he was having a lot of fun, and he would have a couple of on-air interview segments, usually for big deals celebrating theme Raws. For example, Raw 1000. I don't think it was at Raw 25. I can't remember. But old school Raws, of course, Mean Gene will make appearances. And probably one of the best well-known work Gene has done since returning to WWE was Confidential. Confidential was looked at as a shoot-style TV program where pretty much, at least it started off that way. Eventually, it winded down, and it just started sharing stories of wrestlers' hobbies and what they do on their off time. But the very first episode was focused on the Montreal Screwjob and whether or not Shawn Michaels knew ahead of time what was going to happen with Bret at the end of that match. And after all those years, Shawn admitted that, yeah, he knew, and that he was basically following the orders of the old man, Vince McMahon. But yeah, I could point out many great memories. I try to find as many as I could in the beginning there, sharing those interview time with Mean Gene from the time the SummerSlam sign fell when he was trying to talk to Rick Rude and Bobby Heenan. Of course, talking to Brutus Beefcake at WrestleMania 4. There are many others, and some of them are really hard to, in the short amount of time I had here, to compress and to just focus on Mean Gene's voice, as there were too many background sounds. And remembering how he was at WrestleMania 3 to announce the old world indoor record, when he was congratulating Hulk Hogan when he won the title the first time from the Iron Sheik. And yeah, of course, there was Legends House, and a lot of personal stories were shared there. And I think out of memory and respect, I'm going to rewatch those episodes. And Mean Gene was one of a kind. There will definitely never be another Mean Gene Okerlund. And it was really sad to hear that he passed. I was really, really upset. And I was, unlike many others, was really happy to see the outpouring of support and prayers and condolences to the family of Mean Gene. And knowing that he has a new interviewing platform in a better place. And now we can officially have a host at the pearly gates for when the next time should come of another pro wrestler, male or female, passing. We can have Mean Gene at the gates say, please help me in welcoming. Man, we'll know later on. I don't want to jinx anything or anybody here, but yeah. I'd rather not have ended the show like this, but it would be selfish of me if I didn't acknowledge what happened, as it was all over the media. So with that said, with all the names mentioned, Peggy Young, Super Dave, Bob Einstein, and Daryl Dragon, and of course, Mean Gene Okerlund, for all of them to rest in peace, and thank you for all your contributions to entertainment, and whether in music, in comedy, in drama, and in a lot of cases, if you're talking about Mean Gene. But overall, giving all of us, the fans, a good feeling. And your work will never be forgotten. And please join me as I close off the show. Till next time. And a tell bell salute to those that we have lost.